Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It is Dan. We're back for another awesome show. And today we got a serious topic, one that I've covered before on the show. And honestly, it's one of the most requested things that I get for me to cover more often. And that's parental alienation. It's something that unfortunately many of us deal with. As I've shared on here before, I have dealt with it both as a child. My mother tried to alienate me from my father, and as a parent, where my ex-wife tried to alienate some of my children from me. So fortunately, I'm pretty well versed on it, but it's a topic that we're starting to see more and more come out about it. More and more people are talking about it. More and more people are sharing their stories. And that's why I wanted to have my guest on today, because he not only has experienced it himself, and we'll get into that, but he helps other people, men specifically, who are dealing with it and trying to combat it in the courts and in other ways. So let me bring him on, my good friend, and my brother from another mother, although he's got hair and I don't. And by the way, before we get into this, by the way, this is Simon, everyone. He has the mustache I am so jealous of. Come a little closer to the camera, just real quick, Simon, so everybody can see it. That is the best mustache I've ever seen. I am so freaking jealous. I have tried a handlebar. I cannot do it. I admit it. So I bow to you, my friend, just on that. So how are you, Simon?
I'm very well, thank you, Dan. How are you?
I am great. Welcome to the show. So Simon, as you can probably tell, has a wee bit of an accent. He's from across the pond, as we say here in America, and you guys say for us. And so Simon and I started chatting on TikTok a couple of weeks ago, and he told me a little bit about his story, and that's why I wanted to have him on, because it's a lot to digest, and we're going to get into that, and he's going to share a little bit about his personal journey and also why he does what he does. Along those lines, though, before we get started into that, Simon, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, any particular tidbits you want to share?
Yeah, guys, like you said, Dan, I'm from the UK. I'm a furniture designer. I design furniture, I make it, I sell it. I've got an eBay site, keeps me busy all year round. So yeah, all good.
Pretty cool that you make furniture. I don't have that capability. I just woodworking and that kind of thing is not in my wheelhouse, not by any stretch of the imagination. So I again bow to you, my friend.
Runs in the family.
Does it really?
Yeah, my dad was a joiner, and my granddad was a joiner.
So it's been a
So
couple of
yeah.
generations at least. And I have found, having talked with many over in the UK, that is not uncommon where things get passed down generation to generation. Of course, you guys
Yeah.
go back a lot further there than we do in the States. So it's um, amazing to hear that you see that, like you said, your grandfather, your father, and all that. That's awesome. I love that. So, Simon, we're going to talk about parental alienation. And just for the audience to know, it can be a tough subject, but we're probably going to inject a little humor here and there. So just take that with a grain of salt. But why don't you kind of start out, Simon, with why do you speak out about parental alienation? What is it that got you into it?
Well, I met a girl when I was around 33. Sorry, 30, 36, I would say. I should know that, shouldn't I?
Is that
Yeah,
the metric system or the? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
yeah. And yeah, I was 30, 35, 36, or whatever age I was, and I didn't have any children. I'd met a girl, um, a lovely girl. She was very nice and polite and intelligent, and we kind of quickly moved in with each other, and we were with each other for a few years. And she wasn't very maternal. She's a professor, um, psychology, child psychologist. So her whole life was about working and studying. She was studying all kinds of like everything you can think of. She was studying it. And I said to her, "Look, I'm getting a bit older, and I'm thinking about children, and we're together, and we're having a good time." And yeah, I said to her, "Look, let's have a child." And she was like reluctant to have one, and we had conversations about it. And she said, look, if we're still together in a year's time, we'll have a go. And after about 6 months, she took that contraceptive device out of her arm,
Hmm.
and literally the first month that she took it out, she fell pregnant. So yeah, it was great. I always remember it's quite funny actually because she came home from work one day. She was making me a cup of tea over in the corner of the kitchen, and I was sat down here, and she said, "Sam, I've got something to tell you." And she goes, "I'm pregnant." And like you're not expecting somebody to say that to you, and it's
Yep.
it's quite a shocking thing to say. Like I don't know why, but my reaction was, "Is it yours?" I have, I have no idea why I said that. No idea whatsoever. But
That's great, Simon.
yeah, yeah. Is it yours? I don't. Yeah,
You
crazy.
know, it's funny just to kind of touch on that subject briefly. I remember I have five biological children. I have a stepson that I count as mine also, so six total. But that experience when your wife, girlfriend, whatever tells you she's pregnant is something that's every guy remembers that moment, and we all react
Yeah,
differently. And what's funny in my case is I reacted differently each time. You know,
yeah,
the very first time I went, oh, because it wasn't that it was a surprise because we wanted to have a child, but it was like, oh crap, I'm about to be a dad. And then the second time, um, that was a child we actually lost in utero. Um, that one was a
sorry
bit
to
of,
hear that, man.
yeah, it is what it is. That one was a bit of a surprise. So my response was kind of like yours. Are you sure? That type
Yeah,
of thing. So each
yeah,
each experience is different, but I love your story. That's awesome. So
yeah,
continue. I sorry I interrupted you, but that was too good not to
yeah.
touch on.
So basically, she got pregnant, and after the 9 months had passed, um, the baby wasn't coming. So she went to hospital, and they did some tests here and there, and they decided to do, like, is it called induce? They induced her.
Induction, yeah, induction.
Yeah, yeah. So they did that, and yeah, that started off that process. And she had the baby, but when the baby was born, they realised that like, obviously it was a. Sorry, I missed a part out there, Dan. I apologise.
No, no worries.
She had an emergency cesarean,
Okay.
and obviously they'd cut her open, and did what they needed to do, but they'd found that she'd got an infection, sepsis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it was quite interesting actually, because I was in the room when they were doing it, and there's a curtain, like I'm stood where a head is behind a head,
Yep.
and there's a curtain, like, on a chest
Yep.
that goes up, so you can't see past it. Like, obviously I was sticking my head over the curtain. Um, yeah. So Arabella was born, and the mother had sepsis, and she was shipped away to go and get, obviously, stitched up and get dealt with, and have the antibiotics, and basically just get checked over. And so was Arabella. She was taken out of that room into another room to be checked, to be weighed, um, yeah, and just generally be checked over. I went with Bella, and um, did the skin on skin. Sat with her. We delayed that for a period of time because obviously we wanted to wait until Mum was fit and ready to come in and see her child.
Hmm.
But a period of time had passed, so it come to a point where I did the skin on skin, and hold the baby with, like, no shirt on, as you
Right.
do.
Right. Right.
And obviously Bella had got my scent and could hear my heartbeat probably, and that's where they say the connection happens.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there, done that, my friend.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
something I will never forget with my children. And it's one of the
yeah.
highlights of your life. It always is.
what usually happens then, probably the same in your country, in America, but it's usually the mother that does the skin on skin first.
Hmm.
They do the skin on skin first, around 15 minutes or 10 minutes or so. And then the father comes in, takes his top off, and he does it. Yeah, that's how it works around here. But obviously, it didn't plan out that way in my situation. But yeah, she was after the cesarean, after the sepsis, she couldn't do anything. The doctors told her she couldn't do anything for several weeks. Like she couldn't drive. If she did, she wasn't covered on insurance and things like that. She couldn't work. She couldn't do any exercises or sit up or jump out of bed quickly because it might blow her stitches.
Right.
And she was just generally unwell during this period of time. Like she did spend about 2 or 3 days in hospital, and during that 2 or 3 days, I was in the hospital with with my daughter, and obviously I spent a lot of time with her. I came home eventually, actually by myself, and had my daughter overnight at home, and then I had to go back and pick up my partner at the time. Um, yeah, so when she finally did come home, she basically couldn't do anything for several weeks, and I spent most of the time with my daughter, and she was like resting in bed, and I was trying to work. Her mum actually came round to spend some time, so I could, because I was running a business at the time, and
Hmm.
I know I had a couple of people working for me, but I still had to put my head in the workshop here and there, make sure they're working and stuff, because obviously as soon as we backed it, and
Oh,
I
I
remember one guy. I went to work one. I went in the workshop one day, and he was doing some painting for me, and I was showing him out. I showed him how to paint because he had ADHD, so he's a young lad, and he was quite difficult to learn him. But he was a nice guy, and I was showing him how to cut in, and I cut in with him, and I thought, well, I'll go in the house and let him do the painting. And I went back in a few hours later, thinking he's a bit quiet, so I went in. And what he'd done, he'd done no work whatsoever. He'd climbed on top of my workbench. He'd curled up in the fetal position,
oh no.
and he'd poured the paint
Oh,
all over himself.
oh no.
And I was like, oh man, it was just like you couldn't make it.
He's
You
got
couldn't
no
make it up,
he's
Dan.
got no excuse at that point, right?
You couldn't make it up. Yeah, so yeah, he was a funny guy. I still see him now. Actually, he I think he looked up at me as like a father figure.
Hmm.
But yeah, he's a nice guy. But he just had so many issues with his ADHD, and it was quite severe. He just didn't seem to care about anything.
Hmm.
He just couldn't. I don't know. Lovely guy anyway. Um, yeah. So where was I?
You're talking about taking care of your
Yeah,
your daughter.
yeah. So I was looking after Arabella, um, and obviously she felt guilty about that. That's not a very nice scenario for any mother to go in. Like when a child's born, obviously the mother would like to bond with that child and spend as much time with that child, but wasn't really in a position to do so.
Hmm.
So I had to do it all. Um, then she tried to breastfeed, and she couldn't breastfeed. Dan, it was like obviously that's just the final nail in the coffin for her, isn't it? She couldn't be there for a child, and she couldn't do the skin on skin, and now she finds she couldn't breastfeed.
It's a tough scenario for her to be in.
Yeah, I always remember I felt terrible for her because she she tried to breastfeed, and the hospital said, just keep trying, it'll come, it'll come, it'll come. Keep trying, be consistent, it'll come. So she did. Bless her. She like she tried and tried. She
Hmm.
tried more than trying. But she to a point it was getting obsessive. So then she decided to go and buy some the breast pumps, and they didn't work. And I remember her throwing it, saying, "Oh, it's crap, this breast pump. I'm going to have to go and buy another one." So we bought another one, and same
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 thing happened.
scenario.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's where it all started, Dan. Like I've given you that story because you like the bond that me and Belle have got, and we still have. If you I put videos online and people see us together, and everybody says, "Look, what a bond these guys have got," and that's where it's come from, I think. And yeah, so when she was feeling better, obviously I had to go. Well, look, it's your turn. You need to bond. You need to do your thing. You need to spend time with her, so I could go back out to work and do my thing. Um, but that's where the problem started. So when Bella went to her mother and she wasn't with me, she would just scream like to a point where her face is bright red and she's catching her breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so heartbreaking to see that, because when when her mum tried to feed her, she wouldn't allow it. Bella wouldn't allow it. She wouldn't go to sleep on her. Like, I even bought one of them gliders, it's like a rocking chair, glides backwards
Yep.
and
Yep.
forwards like
We had
this.
one for our kids back in the day. Yep.
And she's like this, and she was trying to get her to sleep, and it just wasn't working. Like, this was happening all the time. Like, she just couldn't get her to sleep. She couldn't feed her. She didn't really want her even touching her when uh, she just didn't want to have anything to do with her mum. It was just so awful to watch. But at first, I thought it was a quirk. I thought it was quite nice. I was thinking, yeah, my child loves me. But at first, I didn't really think how it made her feel.
Right.
And there was one time when she was on this glider upstairs, and she says to me, "I'm going to go and put Bella to sleep." So, yeah, fair enough. I'll do my thing. And I could hear Bella crying. So I walk upstairs and she's on the glider, and Bella's crying. I say, "Look, do you want me to help?" And she kind of, you could see she was a little bit annoyed. She said, "No, no, it's fine. I'm good. I can do this." I was like, "Okay." So I went downstairs, and the crying got worse. So I went back upstairs and I was like, "Come on, let me give it a go." She was like, "No, no, 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 I'm fine. I'm good." Third time I went like that, came back up the stairs. Bella was screaming so much, and I walked in the room, and she is bright red. She looks like she's like having an anxiety attack. Like, she wasn't breathing properly,
Mm.
and she was holding her breath while she was crying, and it was horrible to watch. And I asked her, I said, "Look, let me take over," and she said no. So my reaction was just to grab my daughter. So I just went down and took her from her mum.
Mm-hmm.
And the second I grabbed her and I brought her to my chest, it was like boom, stopped,
Hmm.
instant. And obviously, like, that wasn't that wasn't going to make the mum feel very,
Oh, she probably
very well,
felt like
very, yeah,
absolute crap at that point, and
yeah, yeah.
understandably so, right?
Mm,
I mean, she's
yeah, she did.
it would have been the same if it was the other way around, and you were the one trying to comfort the child, didn't work, and she came along. It would be no different. Um, Unfortunately, though, that's what your child wanted, and the child has to come first, right?
Yeah, I always remember because she stood up and her face was red and she was angry. Yeah, I could see she was angry. She was quite a calm person, to be fair. Um, she wasn't very reactive at all. Yeah, quite a pleasant girl. And she jumps up and I can see she's angry. I can see that she's red in the face and she's shaking and things, and really, really upset with the situation. And she said to me, "Great, now I feel like a bad parent." And I just thought, what do we do? What can we do? This carried on for a while, and Bella's mum says to me, "Look, I'm going to go back to live with my parents and take Bella with us, and because I need to bond with her, and I can't bond with her while you're here." And I was like, "Look, we're a partnership. We're living together. We need to deal with it together. We
Mm-hmm.
can deal with this together. We'll get some help. And we'll deal with it." Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
She was adamant. She was adamant that it just wouldn't work. She was a child psychologist. She knows what she's talking about. She was well educated and
Hmm.
extremely intelligent. So her plan was to, if I get this right, um, Wednesday she would come over and it would be date night. And she would come over with just herself and we would have a date night and we'd spend time watching movies and that. Saturday would be a family day. So she'd come over on a Saturday and we'd all spend the day together. And then Sunday was Daddy's day and she'd go into the office because I have an office upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was her plan. Well, that went on for a while. And as you can imagine, we'd gone from living together to now living apart.
Right.
And now my child's been taken away. And yeah, it just fizzled out, Danny. Just I don't know what it was. I think she resented me. I think she blamed me. And I started to resent her because like she took my child away.
Right.
Just so she can bond with that child on her own. Well, I was thinking, well, what about my bond? And
I
I need
was
to
just
continue
going to
with mine.
say exactly that
Mm,
to you is why is the focus, if she's a child psychologist, I would think she should know better. You don't
yeah,
try and improve the one parent's relationship by depriving the or lessening the relationship with the other parent for the child. How does that benefit the child to do that? Forget the parents.
no,
I'm focused on the child here. You know, your daughter clearly had bonded with you, needed that comfort that you gave her, that security, if you will. And here, her solution is to do everything she can to break that.
yeah,
You know, it affects you and her, your ex, but it's really affecting the child. And I'm actually shocked that a child psychologist would do that. And I think it's a fair assumption. She was probably jealous of the connection you had, and this was her way of breaking it. Sounds
yeah.
like it to me.
When I said earlier it was like a light switch, it literally was like a light switch. Like the second that she touched, like she came into my arms and she could probably, I don't know, smell my scent or whatever it was that she connected me with. Yeah, she just stopped completely. Like she
And
wouldn't cry at all.
I think that's a bond that's unique to daughters and fathers. Sons and
Yeah,
fathers have a different type of bond, but and I would make the same argument, by the way. You know, mothers and sons, mothers and daughters have different bonds, but
yeah,
there's
I
that
totally agree.
bond that's there where and I know I have it with my daughters, and it is different than what I have with my sons because I have 3 and 3. But it's that sense of security is the word I'll use, that they know they're protected, especially as babies, right? They know they're protected. They, like you said, they know your scent and all of that. And it gives them that level of comfort that maybe they weren't getting from someone else. In your case, it was your ex. And yeah, I could see where the jealousy would come in. Understandable. I'm not going to falter for that.
Yeah,
I am going to falter though for her way of
yeah,
addressing it. That to me, as someone, now I'm not a child psychologist. I'll be the first to tell you that she far outstrips me on that. But just on the smell test, to use a pun there, it doesn't seem right to break your relationship with your
yeah.
daughter. And the one that gets harmed the most is the daughter.
The thing is, when I think about it, I can't even think of a way of fixing that because she literally wouldn't go to it all. Like she was 100% about me. And I know it sounds silly, but maybe we could have maybe sat together or I don't know, just kept us both close and stuck Bella in the middle or something. Maybe I could have
That
started bottle feeder between us, and then I could swap hands, and mid halfway through I could maybe try and sneak away and stuff,
that would
and
have
try and
seemed a
get
much more prudent
yeah,
solution to at least try first.
yeah,
But
yeah.
doesn't sound like she did any of that or wanted to.
Then I could have like slowly moved away and got further away, and to a point where I'm now not even in the room, and then we could go back to the beginning and see if she can bottle feed it from the start. And I think there was other ways done. There was other ways of doing it. I don't believe there was ever going to be a positive outcome with, especially with our relationship, we went from living together to be completely apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it even felt strange, Dan. When she was coming on the Wednesday, I hadn't seen my daughter since Sunday, and she turns up without my daughter. And I know we got we should have been spending time together as well, but she left my daughter at a parent's house, and like I obviously wanted to see her. I
Right.
wanted to see both of them.
Right.
But yeah, that's where we were, and she was having a rough time with it, and rightly so. But it wasn't my fault, and I think looking back now, the jealousy, like I think it ate her up, and she's still going through it now. Like she always she always comes across as if she tries to tell me that she loves her more than me, like they have some special bond. Like if someone said that, oh, Bella looks like your dad,
Mm-hmm.
that would irritate the mother. Um, yeah, she wouldn't be happy about anything like that, or like if she looked like me, or if like she'd seen a video of us having a great time, she'd probably send me another video back with them having an even greater time.
Yeah, she's
It was
turning it
it
into
felt like,
a
yeah,
contest. It sounds like where
yeah, yeah,
she's trying to win. There's no winner there, right? It's again,
no,
I always go, Simon. I always go back to the child, right? What does this do for the child for her to do that? And there is no benefit to the child. And as a child of parental alienation that lived through what your daughter's going through in some ways, it's
mm,
it. That's what frustrates me about the whole thing is the people that engage in that behavior cannot or will not step back and go, what am I doing to my, in your case, daughter, could be son or daughter, and what's the long term effects? And it just makes me sad when I see that.
yeah. Just to give you an idea of timing, Stan. So when when our relationship came to an end, uh, Bella was 9 months old, and that's basically where it all started. Um, so she said to me, "Well, I'm gonna." We agreed to end the relationship because it just wasn't working. It couldn't work with the way she felt and going backwards in life. Like she'd gone from living together to living with the parents,
Mm-hmm.
and how I felt, I felt like I'd lost my daughter somewhat. If you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'd gone from living with her, even it's like the first 6 weeks of my life. This is the problem I had with her. She only understood her own feelings. I understand that she felt she may have failed as a mum, especially with the not being able to breastfeed.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a big deal for a new mother, especially taking into account that she couldn't spend that time at the beginning of a birth and stuff. And yeah, so yeah, she
I
was
can
9 months
understand
old.
it too, Simon, but it doesn't excuse what she's then was
No,
doing in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's I would argue it's more detrimental to her as the mother to do what she's doing.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm just trying to, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, Dan. I'm trying to understand
Mm-hmm.
her feelings. But what I was trying to get at is she didn't understand mine. Like she took the child away, and I spent 6 weeks with the child mostly, especially the first couple of weeks. And that I bonded with my child as well,
Mm-hmm.
100%, like a real tight bond. I'm the same in other parts of my life. Like when I've got a few friends. I don't have a ton of friends, but the friends that I do have, um, I love them very much. I have a friend we call G. His nickname G. I still don't know why to call him that, but I've known him since I've known him since I was 16, and like we literally called each other every day. In
Uh-huh.
fact, I spoke to him just before I started talking to you, and he's always calling me up, and we have like a good relationship with my friends and my father and my mother. and that's just where I am. Once I respect somebody or I'm friends with them, like I want it to be lifelong.
Mm.
If you know what I mean, Don. Like I don't have people coming in and out of my life all the time. Yeah, so I really bonded with her, and we decided to end the relationship. We both agreed that it just wasn't working. And at that point, my next question was obviously, when do I get to see Bella?
Right.
Yeah. And she she suggested things like, well, bearing in mind she's 2 to 2.5 hours away, 2 hours 15 minutes away she is from where I live. She would like propose to me that I would see my daughter for 1 or 2 hours. She would be there, and I could go to the park. And she kept saying, like, well, she needs to stay. She needs to stay here. She needs to be with me. You can't take her away. You can see her at the park. And I'm obviously arguing my case. Look, I want to see her all night. Look, when she was born, I had her for 3 weeks. So,
Right. Right.
which you got no excuses whatsoever. So anything reasonable to say to me that I can't have my child overnight. Anyway, it just turned into arguments, and I agreed to come through with that. So I was seeing her like once a week for a few hours, and that went on for a period of time. And then I started to ask for more, and she just had none of it done. She wasn't budget, man. She wouldn't compromise at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted one thing, she wanted another thing, and we were just at loggerheads. And I started threatening with court, saying, "Look, I'm going to file for court action if you're not playing ball." And she was like, "Okay, okay." We didn't speak for a little bit, and I got a letter from a solicitor about child matters, and she'll be representing um, Bella's mum,
Mm-hmm.
which came to a shock to me because I said it just to try and make her understand, like, look, if you're not gonna play ball, I'm gonna go and speak to a judge. I thought it might prompt her to maybe uh, play the game, if so to speak,
Right.
and give me some more time with her. But she was having none of it, and she decided to go and file to court. And I went to court, and I was stood there, and this was for a child arrangement order. So we went to court, so she could say, "I want him to spend this many hours with my daughter," and I would say, "Well, I don't want that many hours. I want to spend overnight stays on Wednesdays and Sundays or whatever." And you need to come to some kind of agreement, or you do some mediation,
Mm-hmm.
and the judge will decide what happens. But she just stood up in court, her and the solicitor, and threw out allegations of like me being controlling and coercive and basically everything you could think
The
of. Then,
classic silver bullet is
the,
what it's called. Yep. It's straight out of the
yeah,
silver bullet. Yep.
it was just little snippets of allegations just to try and work her way in.
Yep.
Well, to put me on the back foot. Well, like I said earlier, Dan, she was a professor, very well respected and very well known.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, 6 foot tall and curly moustache and a beard and tattoos.
Tattoos and
And
all that.
she's 5'2" and she goes in there and she probably outranks everybody in the room,
Mm-hmm.
to be fair. So I was already on the back foot, and she put all these allegations in. Most of them were just silly. It was just to cause trouble, just to put a spanner in the works. Yeah, and then So then what the court decided to do was to adjourn it and to decide um, what they're going to do about the allegations, and that she had to put the allegations in. And she put more in and more in and more in. We went to court dozens of times, and in the meantime, I wasn't seeing my daughter. And then I came back to court and said, "Look, I need to see my daughter. There's these allegations, but there's no evidence to support. Um, I don't know where they're all coming from." And yeah, she just kept adding more, and adding more. It was, if I remember rightly, it was something like 400 paragraphs. Believe it or not,
So,
it went on for it went on for 5 years. 5 years this went on
so
for,
okay,
Don.
that
And
was going to be a question I was about to just ask you. So, what was the time frame on it? So, 5 years.
yeah,
Now, how often were you seeing Bella? Is her name? How often were you seeing Bella in that time? What did the court do in that time? Did they?
yeah.
Because I'm
So
curious as to whether they tried to the court I'm talking about maintain contact and the parental bond that you had.
yeah, so when we went to court, she decided to stop contact. So by the time we got to court and everything, I hadn't seen her for a period of time. Um, so then they said that I needed to uh, slowly bring her back into my life. And I thought that was crazy because, like, I'm a dad, of course she knows who I am. And that went on for a few months where I had to go and see her for a few hours here and there. And it just seemed like then we were getting somewhere through the court process.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as we got somewhere, there'd be another
It's
allegation, and
classic,
another allegation.
classic.
And she wouldn't stop. She wouldn't stop at all. Yeah. I remember, I'll give you an example of one. I remember when I was sat in the front room, and this was when we were together, and I was having some spaghetti bolognese, and I was sat on the chair eating my spaghetti bolognese. It was on the arm of the chair, and I was kind of eating like this, and she was just nagging me about everything, just nagging, nagging, nag. So my intention was to get off the sofa and walk off. But what happened is my plate was hanging over the edge of the armchair, and as I stood up, my hip caught it. It went on the floor. All this
Mm-hmm.
spaghetti bolognese. Anyway, one of the allegations was that I was eating spaghetti bolognese one day,
And throw it at
and
her.
I threw a plate at the corner of the wall, and it went all over the wall and all over the carpet, and it just missed Bella's crib. No such thing happened. In fact, I've still got the stain on my carpet. You know what? If I got a new carpet, I'd probably cut that bit out
You want
because
to save that for posterity too,
you
right?
you can still, yeah, you can still see it. But like there was allegations were just crazy. Like she would write allegations about, oh, I was one day, Dan, I drove to drop her off one day. This is obviously when I was seeing her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she made an allegation that I was abusing my child because when I was driving to drop her off, I had all the windows down. It was a hot day, and I had 10 green bottles. The song, I don't know if you've heard of it, where it goes 10 green bottles
No, I
sitting
don't.
on a wall.
No, I don't know that.
Yeah, well, it's like a nursery rhyme or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, wait, like 99
Uh,
bottles of beer on the wall. It's probably similar to that.
yeah,
That's
yeah, it was one of them, and I was singing it, and it wasn't blasting, but it was reasonably loud.
uh-huh.
And she said that I was abusing her by having my music on too loud. And when I pulled up, she'd come flying at my car, opened the back door, grabbed Bella, stormed off, and just didn't say anything and drove away.
Mm.
And because I was singing in the car. Well, I'm a pretty bad singer, Dan. So I'm not a very good singer.
Well, she can hold
But
that
yeah,
against you, but I mean, the fact that you were
yeah,
singing, I mean, come on,
yeah.
classic
How about
alienator
you? Been
behavior, though.
I thought you were going to ask me to sing there. But
No, I'm not going to ask you to
no,
sing, my friend.
no chance.
And I'm
Sound like
no
I'm
better,
swinging a
so
cat.
I can play guitar, but no, I wasn't allowed to sing in any of the bands I was in. I was banned from singing, so yeah, I can relate to that.
Looking back now, Dan, if I skip forward for a little bit, obviously I've gone through this scenario with a number of guys. And what seems to happen, where the pattern is, as soon as somebody gets a solicitor, obviously it's in the solicitor's interest to drag this out as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They're on between £200 and £400 per hour. And if they can stretch another 10 hours, that's for 3, 4, 5 grand. So yeah, they do that. And what normally happens is as soon as they get a solicitor, allegations just it's just allegation after allegation after allegation. And looking back now and what I've seen, every single case that I've worked on, because I was upset by the allegations. I wouldn't want people to think I was
Oh, how
this
could you not
terrible
be? Right,
person.
right.
Right. But I can hand on heart, Dan. I think I spend a lot of time trying to be a nice person, and I make an effort. And anybody who knows me would know that I'm one of the kindest people you'll meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I spend a lot of time focusing on being a good person. Um, no, so yeah, it's like a script. It's a script that I see in every case, and they're literally identical.
Oh,
The allegations start.
absolutely. And I've had lawyers on the show that have talked about exactly that, where it's
Yeah,
now some of them are saying they're now seeing it, at least in the States. I don't know about the UK, but 75% of all cases are following that very script you're talking about. When it comes to a
yeah,
child custody situation or child support, they're kind of intertwined. They're seeing it, it's become so common to have a case that doesn't involve it is rare.
I've never seen it.
And
I've never seen it.
it's crazy that we've gotten to this point, and it all goes back to what, well, two things. One, they want to make sure that mom's getting as much money out of the father as she can. And two, the solicitor, in your case, or lawyers as we call them, are getting every penny they can out of the family. And that's the bottom line really that drives it is if they can create animosity between the parents, they cash in the barristers, lawyers, whatever you want to call them. And who loses in the end? The child does.
Yeah. But you know the best bit, Dan? The best bit about this is the courts encourage it. So
Absolutely, they
I
do.
don't know. I don't know how it is in America, but if a female doesn't, I don't think it works for males. If for a female, if they say that they were in a domestic violent relationship or there was domestic violence within the relationship, they get something called legal aid.
Yep.
And legal aid is where it's all paid for.
Yep.
So, what do you want to do? Do you want to spend 25 grand with on fees and tell the truth, or do you want to say that he pushed me around and thank you very much? We'll go to court and string this out as long as possible because it's in my favour to do so. It puts him on the back foot. It puts distance between him and the child, and I'll get my solicitor to dig a big hole for everybody, and we'll be waiting months and months for police records and social workers' records, and we'll do investigations here and investigations there. And before you know it, a year's gone by, and now they're saying you don't know your daughter, so you get
Yeah.
it's a
Then they
trap.
then they use that
You get
against you, right? Oh, you haven't taken
yeah,
care of her in a year, so we got to make sure you can now take care of her. And it's like, I haven't taken care of her because you haven't allowed me to. It's not that I can't do it; it's that you won't let me. And it's the same thing in the States, right? They use that same argument. Legal aid, some mothers can go through domestic violence shelters and get the aid that way, but it's not uncommon that the mothers have to pay for it themselves, but that their attorneys that are representing them will say, well, we'll just get the court to award attorney's fees from your ex. And a lot of mothers buy into that and they create these scenarios. And then they find out later, judge didn't do that. Now these mothers are behind the eight ball for hundreds of thousands of dollars themselves for a situation they created. But the lawyers convinced them to do that, thinking, telling the mother, don't worry about my fees. We're going to make him pay for it. And then all of a sudden they find out later he ain't paying for it. And I know I've interviewed some mothers on that, and they get very resentful about it. And those are the ones that actually suddenly wake up. Most of them, however, don't. Hey fans, I just wanted to take a quick break from the show to remind you just how much we here at Men Need to Be Heard truly appreciate and value your support. And we'd like to ask you to do us a little favor. Could you take a moment and give us that like and share this video with your friends? And hey, don't forget to give us a comment and let us know how we're doing. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us to continue bringing great guests and even more content each and every week. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. It's the best way to stay up to date with all of our latest discussions, interviews, and deep dives, as well as it helps the channel to grow so that we can continue to raise even more awareness on the issues men and boys face in today's modern society. So hit that subscribe button and become part of the Men Need to Be Heard community. All right, that's it for now. Back to the show. So one of the questions that this is a great time to get into this, is one of the questions I wanted to address for the audience, now that you've shared your story, is we've given examples of what parental alienation is kind of on the outside, the periphery of it. But I want to dive in a little bit here, because one of the things I think that really people struggle with is understanding what it is. So can you give me, Simon, how do you define what parental alienation actually is?
I can tell you where it started with me, and go into it that way.
Okay.
So after we were going to court and everything, obviously, all court is just you just sending emails back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You never agree on anything, and it just goes on and on and on. And then next time you're at court, there's more allegation. It just gets dragged out. And then I finally did get some time with my daughter, and things were fine. Like she was seeing me. And because I wasn't spending very much time with her, I remember it brought me heart down. Honestly, like I can feel it now. Like I might have PTSD or something.
Oh, you probably do. Yeah. I mean, I don't hide the fact that I have it from as a child. Yeah. Your daughter probably will have it down the road too. I hate to say, but I totally understand and respect it.
I'll tell you a quick story, John. Like, so when I was doing my statements and things, I was on the computer doing my statements every day, and I was Googling this, and I was learning myself that, and teaching myself law, because I didn't have any representative anymore. Because I used a solicitor at first, and she rinsed me dry, basically. And so I was quite aggressively studying law and family court. I was on the computer constantly. Mm-hmm. And obviously, while I was on the computer, I was feeling anxious and heartbroken and thinking about everything negative. I was receiving buckets and buckets fulls of allegations that I was frantically trying to prove to the world that weren't true. Mm-hmm. Because that's your response. That's anyone's response. That isn't my response now. I've wised up to that.
Right.
But yeah, and it got to a point where even when it was all over, I remember going to my computer, and as soon as I went near it, within about 30 seconds, just felt like something was wrong with my stomach. I was getting anxiety. My stomach was going into knots. Mm-hmm. I was getting like anxious, and I started getting IBS.
Oh, I'm not surprised by any of that. I mean, I've heard it literally hundreds of times.
Yeah. My stomach was in knots. Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Danny, I don't get it. I don't get it so much now, but I still do get that when I go by my computer. So I talked to somebody about that, and they said I might have a little bit of PTSD. But yeah, I was like vigorously searching how to prove your innocence in court. What do I do in court? Because at this point, I didn't have any experience. So you can imagine over the space of like this went on for a couple of years. So you can imagine putting that much effort into learning something, you quickly become knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Uh, so as for Bella, there come a point where, like I say, she was like coming to see me. We were having a fantastic time. That the bond was there, and I remember driving to see her, and I swear to you, Dad, the the hairs the hairs on my arms would stick up as I got close to a house because I was just overwhelmed with emotion to see it. Um, and I always remember that I driving down there, and when you're a kid and it's Christmas, and that feeling of like happiness just takes over you.
Yep.
That's how I felt driving to see her. The hairs of my arms would stick up on the back of my neck. Yeah, but there was one occasion when I went to pick her up, and her mum said to me, she doesn't want to come. She's been crying. I said, well, I'll come and see her. And she wouldn't let go of her mother. And I managed to get her in the car, and I was driving home. Well, I was driving home in my van. She was obviously sat in the passenger seat, and I got to about 3 or 4 minutes away from her house, and Bella just started crying. And I asked her what was wrong. I was like, "What's up, sweetheart? You look upset." And she just started shouting, "I want my mom! I want my mom! I want my mom!" over and over and over for about 40 minutes. I couldn't do anything with her at all. Like I had to get it was driving me insane. Like I had to literally get out of the van because she was just screaming,
Right.
"I
Right.
want my mum," over and over and over. And I pulled over and I tried to cuddle her and settle her down. I managed to get her to settle her down, but like I was thinking, what's happening here? And I spent my time with her, and I took her home, and I met a guy that had been through something similar, and he'd won custody of his children. He was quite an intelligent guy, and he was helping me with my statements and things, and that was a good thing because I was writing with emotion, and he was taking emotion out of it.
Yeah, that doesn't work
Like
with the law. Emotion doesn't work with the law. You got
no,
to stick with logic, I guess, is the way I would
yeah,
put it. Yeah,
it's not emotional court, is it? It's
it's
family
not.
court.
It's anything but
They
emotion.
don't
Right.
yeah they don't care how I feel,
Nope.
and rightly so. Why do they care? Why do they care about me?
Right.
It's for a child. That's simple as that. And he helped me, and he was saying, look, I think that they're being alienated. There's a thing called parental alienation. I was like, I've never even heard it. Obviously, by the title, I had an idea about what it was. We all know what alienation means. So, yeah, I started Googling and compute on the computer again, and started to learn about it. And the Bella not wanting to spend time with me got worse and
Mm-hmm.
worse and worse. And we got back to court, and there was social services, sorry, not social services, Kafkas were involved, and they didn't see any issues with me. They came around my house and everything, and they turned over every stone and had a look and decided that there was no reason why I can't see my daughter, but she just kept with the allegations and kept on at that. And the courts don't always follow the Kafkas officers. Um, yeah, she was more reluctant to see me time I went to see her. So I started to learn about parental alienation. And at this point, I didn't really know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading this something online saying parental alienation removes half of your family tree.
Truer words have never been spoken, my friend, and I am living proof of
Yeah,
that.
and it was actually an image. It was on Google Images, and
Mm-hmm.
I sent the mum that image, and she sent one back saying, "Don't use words you don't understand. You need to understand what they mean before you make any allegations."
That's classic alienator behavior. But I will just to
Yeah,
briefly interject. I have been as a child. My mother did everything she could to separate from me from my father, but she also separated me from my father's family. Half of my family tree, to your point. I have connection with some of them, but I don't have a deep connection. They're not family to me. They're no different than a friend at best, and in some cases just an acquaintance because of that situation. So I couldn't agree more that it's not just
mm,
about the parental part of it; it's the familial. If I said that right, family part of it. Sorry, I can't spit into word out. But go ahead, continue on. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah. She just she basically sent me an email, very annoyed. Don't say things that you don't understand. And yeah, I started to learn about it. And as I was learning about it, I could see it happening. I'd gone from having a child that would only let me bottle feed her, would only let me put her to sleep, would only let me touch her. And now I'm finding myself sat in my van with my daughter, screaming to go home to her mother.
Can I ask you real quick,
And
Simon? How old was she at this
yeah,
point? How old was Belle at this point?
uh, I would say she was between 2 and 3, I think.
Think about that for those of you
Yeah,
listening. How many children do you know at 2 or 3 years that would actively say, I don't want to be with either mom or dad, with my parent? They don't do that naturally. There's a key sign, and
yeah.
that's why I wanted to touch on that.
So it's a red flag. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, it, that's exactly what I say to everybody. If you've got a two or a child's come into this world, it doesn't know anything. It relies on its caregiver.
Exactly.
Um, it knows nothing. Everything from when a child's born is all learned behavior. And yeah, it goes against nature. For it goes against nature for my daughter to be not wanting to spend time with me.
Right. We are
So something
biologically programmed to want to be with
programmed,
our
yes, yeah,
parents and evolutionary
yeah,
also. So when a child does that, this is a very key point you're making here, Simon. When a child,
mm,
in effect, rejects one of their parents, that's like waving a red cape in front of a bull that there's something wrong here. That's a
yeah.
very, very key point that a lot of people don't understand.
Well, looking at the research and looking at my experiences, the only reason that a child would reject a parent is for two reasons. One, that parent, sorry, is abusive, or that's an alienated child.
Right.
I unless you can come up with one, Dan, I can't see any other scenario
No,
where a child
I
would
don't
accept
know
a
of
parent.
any other either, and this is not probably phrased the right way, but even if a child's being abused, they normally will not reject the other parent. So that's
Yeah.
an even. I mean, I'm not trying to excuse that in any way, shape, or form. So don't somebody twist that. But even an abused child still wants to be with their parent. More so. There are
Well,
exceptions, of course, but when you see a child outright rejecting a parent, it's almost always parental alienation going on, at least in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. So when you see a child rejecting a parent and you eliminate any abuse, that's that's a big red flag for parental alienation.
Well, the problem is you'll see a lot of those who are alienators, the ones committing it, will fall back on the abuse excuse. Well, and you kind of dealt with it with allegations, right? That's how they set that up. Well, he might be abusing the child, and that's why she's rejecting him. When in reality, that it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but if a child's rejecting a parent, it's almost always alienation. Abuse may be a factor, but it's not the factor that they want you to perceive it as much, because
Yeah.
that's their fallback excuse to alienate. My mother tried that, right? She did
Well,
every scenario possible. She did try that at one point, and I was a little older at that point, and I just looked at her and said, "Are you kidding me?" Right? But that's a very common tactic they'll use to justify their alienation,
yeah,
is to claim abuse when there is no abuse.
yeah, yeah. So that's exactly what's happened in the case that I'm on now. She's got nowhere to go, and the only place she can go right now is to say it's abuse, because they would have to eliminate that before they even considered parental alienation. But you touched on a good point earlier about they still wouldn't reject a parent fully if they were abused. If you look at it, children that were sexually abused as children, there's many cases where the child would grow up and actually defend the abuser.
Exactly. Yes.
And another red flag, when you look at abuse versus parental alienation, another red flag is that um, the child will be strongly in line with the other parent, where the child will believe that one parent's all good and the other parent's all bad. So they'd be strongly in line with that parent. Whereas an abused child, that's not always the case. But in an alienating case, it's always the same. They're always strongly in line with the alienator, because that's the dominant parent. That's the
Correct.
alienating parent.
Yeah, it becomes, for an alienated child, it becomes more of a black and white scenario, to put it a different way. Whereas an abusive situation, there's usually some gray involved. And again, there's exceptions. I know people are going to come back and go, "You're making light of abuse." No, we're not. They exist, and we're not saying they don't. But they are different, and unfortunately, and I'm going to reiterate this point again, too many times abuse is claimed when it's actually alienation. And these
Mm.
behaviors need to be seen. The courts don't recognize them for the most part, at least not in the US. I'm sure the UK is probably no better, where they don't see it for what it is. If they hear that allegation of abuse, and I'm not saying they shouldn't investigate, they absolutely should, but they tend to go too far and cut off
Mm.
contact and feed to what the alienator's trying to do. That's why they go to that route. And sounds like that's been some of the experience you've had, but some of the people you've worked with as well.
The problem I'm finding is that the people involved, like Kafkas and the courts, they're not trained in parental alienation. I think Kafkas do like a 4 hour training, and they do have some tools that they use on the internet, but they're driven by the people putting the answers in. So if you don't understand it yourself, maybe you're not punching in the right answers to the
Right.
right questions. So I think it's flawed. Like I'll get into a bit later, but there was I remember a case where the children had been alienated. We hadn't proven it at this point, but um, sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine. Actually, while you were kind of talking about Kafka's, and I just want to interject for those in the U.S. that might not know what Kafka's is. Our equivalent would be social services getting involved, and guardian ad litems, or as I call them,
Yeah,
gals, because it's essentially, they're slightly different, but they're essentially the same thing. But yeah, you were kind of talking about how they
yeah,
aren't trained, and or the training they
yeah.
have isn't usually the best.
I'll give you an example of that, Dan. So we were in a case of parental alienation, and the Kafkas officer recommended to the court that the father was to write to the child an apology for the way he's behaved. Well, the way he's behaved is the child's false belief, and doing an apology to the child only enforces that false belief.
Yeah, you're
And
just
for me,
reinforcing the everything the
yeah,
child believes. Exactly.
I thought to myself, that's come from a social worker. That's like the worst thing you can do. Yeah, so they aren't trained in it. They work on intuition, but that only gets you so far.
Correct.
And if you're not trained to look at, like, to recognize patterns, like, is the child rejecting? Is the no? Is that strongly in line with mum? So you've got like a 5-factor model, and you've got the 8 manifestations,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got the 17 tactics, which was the tactics was written by a gentleman called Richard Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
He's the founder of Parental Alienation, and the 8 manifestations, that was Amy Barker, and I'm sure you've heard of him.
I have.
Done. Yeah, and they're not trained to recognize. I don't think they should be trained to understand the signs of parental alienation, and they should follow Gardner's plan. His strategies, and how it manifests in the children. Like, if you look at a case of parental alienation, and the social worker comes out to see the mother and child, and she comes into the house, the mother's got the arm around the child, she's making her a nice cup of tea, the house is clean, and the house is nice, they look like they've got a great relationship. And if she's not trained in recognizing patterns of parental alienation, she would leave that interview, if you like, thinking, wow, what a great relationship. They're fantastic. And that's the problem we've got, that they don't seem to be trained. Like, I have evidenced signs of parental alienation in many cases, and the way they respond tells me that they have no idea what they're talking about. I'll give you an example. So there was a CAFCAS officer on the case, and on the case that I'm currently on, and I've been on this case for 2 years. And she went to visit the guy's children, and the children said she was still playing games. You know how they play games to try and get answers out of children, because you can't just ask them adult questions, can you? You've got to do drawings, and you've got to play games.
Yeah, you've got to be subtle about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So she played this game where she had a series of words. It's not necessary to go into the words, but there was a series of negative words like happy, laughing, words like this. And then there was negative words like unhappy, sad. And she asked the children to what makes them sad and what makes them happy. All the positive words went to mum, and all the negative words went to dad. That was the first point. That's the first red flag. And then she said to the child, "Would you like to see daddy?" And the children both said, "I want him and his family to stay away from me and my family." Second,
Well,
big red flag.
especially, so this is a key point here, right? The verbiage that's used in those scenarios should be a red flag. If a child, let's just say hypothetically, an 8-year-old child let's say they said that exact statement. I want his family, they would say my dad.
Exactly.
Yeah, they would say my dad's family, right? And these are the clues that you want to look for, is when a child of, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years old is using words that an adult would use, that's a sure sign are a virtually sure sign they've been coached. I know there's exceptions, but it's and they don't the Kafkas in your situation, social services in ours, or the GALs or whomever, psychologists, they don't seem to pick up on that. They're like, oh, okay,
Mm.
and that's a huge red flag, huge. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but these are great points you're making, and I want to hammer them home because we're trying to educate
Well,
people on how to see this.
the biggest part of this story, Dan, is the guy I'm working for now. So maybe I should finish off with my situation. So I got to see my daughter in the end, and yeah, it got very complex. It got there was so many statements here put in, and statements. She was putting more statements in, more allegations. The allegations just kept coming, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. And I'd been to court for, well, at this point, a couple of years, 2, 3 years, and I found something out. I found something online about a guardian. It's called a 16.99 guardian because if you look at the family law, it's 16.9. I think it's number 4. And I found the reasons why a court would bring a guardian into proceedings, and it would be if it's been going on for a long time, if it's complex, these type of things. So I basically went in and asked the judge if I can have a guardian, and I was granted it. So this lady wasn't like any other Kafkas officer I'd met. Most of them sit on the fence. They've got that many cases that they can't even really concentrate
Mm-hmm.
on putting anything meaningful together. Like if you ring them, they don't ring you back.
Right.
You leave them messages, they're not interested in you. They come and befriend you, talk to you as if like, oh, this is a great house. It looks like a loving home. Um, I I didn't want to come here today because the mother had uh, said that you're this or you're that. But meeting you today, you're a lovely person, and it's a nice home. You've got pictures on your wall, and you've got a beautiful bedroom for your daughter. And then what would happen? She'd go away and say he's an alcoholic because she maybe seen a bottle of vodka in the corner, or he smokes cannabis or something because she's seen some cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
And they just seem to they go off on one. Like if you say, "Do you drink?" and you say things like, "Well, I had a drink 3 weeks ago because it was my friend's wedding or something,"
Right.
and they'll write down that he likes to drink, they and I've seen that so many times. They didn't really do that with me, but I've seen it. I've seen it on loads of cases, Dan. That from what's been said to what's been written are two different stories.
Very common. Very, very common.
Yeah, but I got this guardian, and she was on the case and it was about 3 months to the next hearing. And by this point, Dan, I was feeling crap, mate. I remember walking into the workshop one day. I don't want to admit this, but I walked in the workshop one day and to do some work. The guys were in there, and I just stood at the doorway and froze. Like I literally just froze. And I felt so depressed, and I just felt horrendous. And I remember walking back in the house, and I've got a sofa just here. And I curled up in a ball, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried. I just couldn't stop. Like, and I remember just thinking to myself, I need to sort myself out. I need to get up. I was feeling anxiety. I had IBS. That was causing me issues. I isolated myself. I wasn't working. I was just paying the guys to work. My business was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
My health was suffering. And I pulled myself together, and yeah, I fought back. And the Guardian, I always remember this. It will stay with me forever. I got every time I went to court, there'd be between 7 and 14 pages, A4 pages of allegations, or reiterating things that's happened, and just generally bad mouthing me. And I remember I turned up at court after the Guardian done all of her work. Well, she kept cards close to her chest, so I didn't know what she was going to do. And I remember going to court, and I was sat there because I went by myself, and I was sat on the chair, and a solicitor came over to me and passed me a position statement. And I said, I don't want it. I'm not interested. And she said, take it. It's the position statement. You're supposed to read it. And she put it on the chair. And I just sat there staring at it. And I got a little bit frustrated. And I started to read it. Dan, sorry. I started to read it. And I must have got to like number 2, and it was blah, blah, blah. Same old nonsense. And
Boilerplate, probably from one she's done 100 times before. Very common
yeah,
that they do.
and I got frustrated down, and I ripped it up. I ripped it up and put it on the chair. I must have ripped it up in as many pieces as I could rip it up into. And I put it on the chair, and I actually left it there. And the guardian called me into a room, and she had a. So when you have a guardian here, they have a solicitor that works for them. So it's the guardian and the solicitor. And when the guardian enters proceedings, it's like the child entering proceedings, because
Right.
she's the child, if you know what I mean,
Right.
but acting on her behalf.
Exactly.
So she has to have a solicitor to do all the legals and to address the court. You don't get guardians standing up and doing legals.
Which is a
Anyway,
little different than the States, because in the States, the guardian ad litem is almost always, not 100%, is almost always an
yeah,
attorney. So they do represent the child, and they act sometimes like they are the child to your scenario. But it is a little different in the States. I just wanted to clarify that quick.
yeah. I remember walking into the room where the guardian was, and at this point, Dan, I felt as if my child, well, my daughter, sorry, had entered this argument between the parents, and I felt like she was picking up on the animosity, and it was affecting her. And because of all the allegations and not being able to see her and seeing her, and then the next time she'd stop me, so I have to go and try and enforce the order. Then she'd come up with something else, something else, something else, and I felt like it it was this grief that wasn't ending. When if someone dies, Dan, if someone dies, you're upset and you grieve and you start to build yourself back up. But this was like never ending.
Mm-hmm.
There was no end to it. I remember walking in there and like tears were like coming down my face. Like I don't go spend my life going around crying in front of anybody. I don't think I've ever cried in front of anybody at this point. And I just walk in and like tears are all over me. And she said, "What's up?" And I said, "I want to withdraw. I want to withdraw because my child's been hurt."
It's so. If I may step in here for a brief moment, this is exactly what I've heard thousands of times. Right? You are not alone, my friend. All right. It's
Yeah,
how I felt. It's unfortunately why a lot of men unalive themselves, self delete themselves, is because they've reached the point where they're just bombarded with it, as you're sharing in your story, where you don't know what to do. It's it's
no,
relentless, and it's not just one person doing it to you. It's not the alienator, it's not the child, it's the system. It's people around you believing what the alienator is saying, and it breaks men. It utterly breaks them. And that's why this is such a terrible situation, because the other side of it that people don't talk about or don't want to talk about is not only does it break the father, and in some cases mothers, because it does go the other way, although it's predominantly against the father. And this is me speaking as a child of it. It breaks the child. I wonder. There's no research that I've ever found. I would love to see research done on teen suicide and how many of them may involve alienation. I'm guessing, But I got to bet if it's anything like the divorced fathers, roughly 40% of all male suicides are divorced fathers going through what you just talked about.
Crazy.
If it's even a fraction of that, half, a quarter of it, that's causing teen suicide, I wouldn't be shocked in the least because I was there. I've never reached a point where I've been in such a deep hole, such darkness that I've even considered that. It's not something I'm capable of, but I can understand it. Oh, hell, can I understand it? That you would
Well,
put a child or a parent through that as a system. Forget the mother or the any of that. Just think about it as a system. Why aren't they addressing that? It's a horrible situation. So I feel your
well, what?
pain. I'm feeling it right now.
Yeah, if you look at the figures there, Dan, I read today that there's 22 million cases just in the US for parental alienation.
Yes.
And you think of all the people like you said about unaliving yourself. How many children or fathers or well, I'll say targeted parents because
Mm-hmm.
it does happen both ways. But I've come on here to help fathers. I'm a father.
Right. Right.
That's what I chose to do. So, and I'll make it clear now that it does go both ways, but it's predominantly men
It's
who are
predominantly
who
against
are
the father.
targeted.
Correct.
Yeah, I would probably go as far as it's 80-90%.
I wouldn't quibble that number. I mean, so I've heard
Yeah,
70 to 80. Whether it's 70, 80, or 90 is irrelevant. It's predominantly the father in that case. So let's not get lost in the weeds, people out there. It's predominantly the father.
yeah, yeah. Like I was saying, I walked into this room and I was in tears, and I said to the guardian, I can't see an end to this, and my child's been harmed with all the animosity. It's been going on for so long. I could feel that she was her emotion. She wanted to see me, then she didn't want to see me. It was all over the place. And I thought to myself, the only way to protect her was for me to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, "Don't walk away, Simon. Sit down." And the first thing she said to me, she said, "Did you read the position statement?" I said, "No." And she said, "Have you got it?" I said, "No." I said, I said to her, she said to me, like, "Did you read it?" And I went, "No." Well, I read the first couple of lines, and then, yeah, I stopped. And I'll be honest with you, it's outside on the chair, ripped into 1,000 pieces. I said, I'm sick of reading it. I'm sick of reading the same thing over and over again, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm bored.
Oh,
And
you'd
she
reached
just
your
looked at
break.
me,
You had reached your breaking point.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I said something. I said to her, "Did you read it?" And she said, "No." And I remember saying to her, "I don't blame you." And I said, "I don't blame you. Like, I'm just sick of hearing it." She said to me, "I can see what's going on here. You keep your mouth shut and leave this to me." And she went in the courtroom and recommended that because I had seen her for a period of time, she recommended that for a month I had to see her through a contact center for a couple of hours, and then the next month I got her for uh, double the amount of hours. So I think it was a couple of hours, and then the next month it was like half a day or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next month I took her home once a week, and then the following month it went to every other weekend overnight stays. It was basically just to, there was no issues with it. It was just to reintroduce me back into my daughter's life because it had been so inconsistent.
Right.
And yeah, I started to learn about parental alienation. And then somebody I knew started going through the same process as me. Mine was all over. Mine was done, and I got my child back. And she's 9 years old now. Bless her. She's the most wonderful child. I could have asked for. Like, if you look at my videos, Dan, you'll
Oh, I
be able to
have,
see it.
yeah. And that's
And
a key
she,
point, Simon, I want to make right here to your credit, right? Is you were strong enough to get to this point and you fought through what you were going through. And the thing I want the audience to take away from it is understand that men that go through this, that give up, we don't fault them ever.
mm,
We need to support them so that they can continue to do what you did, so
yeah,
that ultimately the child benefits, right? Your daughter, like you said, she's doing wonderful, right? She's happy go lucky. You've got that. But had you not had that person to support you, right? She said, I've got this. Most guys don't ever get that person, right? I
mm,
had that person when I was a parent, and my ex was trying to do that with my child. That's the difference maker. So if you are listening to this and you suspect either you or someone around you is, as a dad, I'm using dad, but it could be a mom, but let's just stay with dad, is dealing with that, get them support. Or if you're the person, get support, because the unfortunate thing that I've seen, and I'm sure you have too, is too many guys try and go through it alone. And
yeah,
there are cases where it's worked out. And they're very few and far between, at least from what I've seen. It's the guys that have had support in some way from someone
mm,
that get through it. And ultimately, it's not about the father, it's about the child. And it's the child that comes out ahead more than anyone else. And thank God in your case, you had that person step in and say, let me handle this. Shut up.
yeah. Well, I think a lot of guys out there, men being men, they bang their chest and they
Nope.
do want to show. Like, I'm 6 foot tall, and I think I've been a fighter, a boxer for many years, and I consider myself to be very strong physically and mentally. And I was of the belief before this all happened that nothing could break me. Like, I was mentally, I didn't think anything could break me. I heard about mental health, people with mental health problems, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of crap. Huh?
Right.
Just get on with it. And yeah. So if there's men out there thinking that they need to be strong and tough and they can't, this is your child. You need to stick by what you're doing. You need to stick to what you're doing and concentrate on your children. Like, I've seen so many fathers. In fact, and I'm going off subject a little bit, but I put a video on TikTok recently saying something about parental alienation, and one of my followers asked me a question, and I started talking to him, and I said to him I'd give him a ring tomorrow because I was busy, and then one of his videos popped up when I was scrolling through TikTok actually last night
Mm-hmm.
about midnight,
Mm-hmm.
and he was sat on his windowsill. Like, he just looked, I don't know what it was, Dan, but you know when you watch something and you can just see there's just something not right.
Just doesn't feel
It
right.
was a,
Right.
it didn't. I was watching this video. It was black and white. There was some sad music in the background. Sad music in the background. He was sat in his windowsill, and he was talking about how much he missed his daughter. And I don't know why, but I just messaged him and said, "Ring me." And I left him my number. Within about 2 minutes, he rang me, and for the first 45 minutes, he just ranted down the phone to me, like literally on one breath, like non-stop. I couldn't get a word in edgeways. And he told me the exact same script as every other script. You accuse them of this, you accuse them of that. If that doesn't work, you start saying that he pushed me around, he was coercive, he was controlling. If that doesn't work, it becomes he was physical, and he stretch that out as long as possible. When that doesn't work, it will be now be you abuse the children, then it'll escalate to he sexually abused the children or he raped me. Like, nearly every case that I work on, they've all been accused of all of it. Like,
It's
at
like
least one
they
of them.
have bullet points that
Yeah,
they have this list, and all right, we'll try this one. Up, that didn't work. Go to next. Up, that did. And I've seen the same thing you have, and it's almost exactly the same list in that order
Yeah.
every time. And I blame a lot of times, at least in the States, like again, you're in the UK, I'm in the States. In the States, it's the lawyers driving it, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's a legitimate concern on their part. You got to remember too. In some, and I hate defending lawyers, but sometimes they've got to go by what their client's saying, so they're going to assume the client is telling the truth. But there are other lawyers out there that flip the script, where the client, the mother's saying, "Oh, he's a great dad." Well, are you sure? Has he ever dropped a bowl of spaghetti on the floor that might have come close to the child? Well, yeah, there was this one time, blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, it's an allegation you threw it against the wall and all that. There are absolutely, unfortunately, a bunch of lawyers that'll do that because they make a lot of money off of it. And again, it hurts the child when that happens. And it's sad. That's what of all the things that I do, and I've run in the same scenario as you have, where I've had guys literally on the edge, as yours did, and we try and pull them back. And
Mm.
one thing that people don't understand is those of us in this space that speak out on men's issues and work with it, we hear from guys all the time. And we all talk behind the scenes also, and we try and help each other to help these guys out. And it's a daily occurrence for me. I'm sure it is for you. And it's tough because we don't have anywhere to send them, right? We can try and get them to
Yeah.
help, but there's no real, like again, I don't want to sidetrack too much, but like, for example, you guys over in the UK want to get that minister for men, and the feminists are blocking it every chance they can. This is a case where it's needed, right? Is so that this poor dad he just wants to have a relationship with his children, whatever that might be, and they won't allow it, they being the system and the mother. No one's addressing that. No one's dealing with that. And unfortunately, it is leading to men unaliving themselves. And I would argue a fair number of children. And that's just, can't we just step back from all the animosity and all that and say, what about that issue? Can we just address that? Because what sane person would say, no, we shouldn't try and help people from unaliving themselves? Yet, you've got people in the UK, because I'm involved with some of those people, that's exactly what some of these women's groups are saying is that's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Sorry, I had to get on my soapbox there for a
Yeah.
minute. I'm very passionate about it, as you can tell.
Well, I just got a feeling that I was like, there's something not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, he ranted down the phone for 45 minutes, and I seen every single emotion. I watched him go through every emotion: frustration, anger, upset, heartbreak, everything. Everything you could think of.
Mm-hmm.
It was all laid out right in front of me on this phone call for about 45 minutes. And I genuinely believe that if he didn't speak to me last night, I think something bad would have happened. He was broken, Dan. He was absolutely broken. And I said to him, I won't give his name. I said to him, listen, mate, I've got you.
Mm-hmm.
I will help you. I told him what to do. To give it in short, what actually happened is he split up with his missus. He was seeing the child, got himself a new girlfriend. That's created some arguments and resulted in him being stopped from seeing the child. So he went to court, and Section 7 report, social worker did a report on him. He was absolutely fine, perfect father, looking after his child, no issues whatsoever. So it carried on for a short period of time, and then she stopped again. And then she put an allegation in of sexual assault on the child. And this is what happened. Um, the child had said to the mother, "Can I touch your bum?" And the mother said, "Where did you get that from?" And she said, "Daddy touches my bum." And so she spoke to him and stopped him from contact, and reapplied for court and said what was said. To this day, uh, then I don't know. I don't know if the child even said that. I can't say that. Nobody knows that apart from the mother.
Right.
And he said to me, "She's 3 years old, Simon, and she had a wee, and I wiped her." And to correct me if I'm wrong, is that not normal behaviour?
Well,
You wipe your child's
yeah,
you wipe your
if
child's
you
bum.
didn't do that, there'd be something wrong with you. Sorry.
Well, the first thing I thought, well, if he did if he didn't wipe her bum and the social services came out and she had
They,
all crap up her back, he would be done for neglect.
exactly.
So anyway, the social worker was very biased, and I think he got frustrated with the social worker, and I think she's been very opinionated, and he's currently not seeing the kid. And he said to me last night, I said, you need to. I said to him last night, you need to refocus. You don't need to prove your innocence. You need to stick to what it is that you want. You want to see a child, so tell the judge that there's an allegation that I've touched my daughter's bum. That allegation is true. I do touch my daughter's bum because she has a wee and then I wipe her. And it's as simple as that. And there's no evidence, there's nothing to say that he's done anything wrong. But as soon as he got a girlfriend, Dan, and that obviously upset her, she then used the child, went to court, lost in court, so he got his time with his daughter. And the next part of the script is to accuse somebody of abuse. I was never accused of anything with Bella, but I've seen it so many times. Like it's crazy. They
Eh,
must go to they must go to crazy school.
well,
To,
and the point to be made is that they take little things that are normal,
yeah,
like your scenario, and twist them. And one of the things that I've said on this show before and in other places, alienators are not stupid. In fact, they're usually very highly intelligent. And they know
master
how to
manipulators.
manipulate things, manipulate words, manipulate
Yeah,
scenarios to back their case, which makes it, again, I hate defending the system, but it makes it difficult for the social workers, Kafka's, judges, and all that to discern, because most alienators are very, very good at what they do, unfortunately. And it creates that scenario where, to your point with the case that you're talking about, this poor man he's on his back foot trying to figure out, what do I do, when
mm,
it's a fairly innocuous situation that's been twisted. And hopefully what you say, I mean, that makes total logical sense to go, well, yeah, I touched her butt because I cleaned her up after
mm,
she went to the bathroom. Any reasonable person would go, oh, all right, well, that's not abuse, right? But unfortunately, they get so clouded and they get bombarded with it. These judges can't see the forest through the trees. So it just
yeah.
creates a nightmare scenario, and it creates the situation that you're dealing with, unfortunately.
Well, when you're dealing with a master manipulator, an accomplished liar, and somebody who's brilliant at managing impressions, you've got a combination there of a skill set that's very dangerous and
And
can
by the
put you.
way, just to sorry to interrupt again, and have no compunction about doing it, no
No,
regret, none
not much fun,
whatsoever.
nothing,
That
no
that is the
empathy.
most dangerous part about it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's a key point.
Well, if you listen to the experts say that if you're an alienator, um, there are three types of people. There's borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and sociopathic personality disorder. You can't be an alienator without one of them types. So we're talking about serious people here.
Mm-hmm.
They,
Agreed.
they know how to lie. They know how to. They get free legal aid. They've got a legal team backing them up. Yeah, and the guy, what the men normally do is when this first happens, they go there and tell the absolute truth and show that they're a nice person. And everyone's getting their claws out, and he finds himself in this huge hole. And by the time he gets in it, by the time he realizes he's in a hole, he he's that deep he can't get out. And like you say, it's gone round in circles that many times that now he hasn't seen his child for so long that we now have another issue.
Right. They weaponize that against him now.
Yeah, you can't win. And then they'll say to you, "Oh, well, he keeps phoning me in, so you agree to sign an undertaking to promise the court that you won't contact someone and say, well, I'll just sign it anyway because it's something have no intention of doing." And then they use that against you.
Exactly.
You just can't win. But yeah, I went through I helped a few fathers, and they were pretty basic cases. They were all probably got domestic violence in it. I told them just to focus on the child, because if she's arguing that you're this, that, and the other, and you argue back, you've now got an argument. If they argue that you did X, Y, and Z, and you just say whatever, you've got some idiot arguing with herself. So let her get on with it. Just stand up and say, "Look, I'm not interested. This didn't happen. There's no evidence." But what happens is she writes 15,000 pages of allegations, and you reply to every single one, and add a few thousand more back, and it just builds up, and the case just gets lost. And at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to lose because the child's with the mother.
Right.
And you respond when someone makes an allegation. If I made an allegation against you now, Dan, your first reaction would be to tell me that that's not true, and you'd want to try and prove that to me or prove it to the world that something's not true. And that's how you get caught up in the system.
It's driven, you're then driven by emotion as opposed to, okay, I have to respond to this. I let my emotions take over. And like you said, you write 15-page response when in reality, all you had to say is, yeah, she went to the bathroom and I wiped her bum, as opposed to a 15-page dialogue fighting back. Your point is a very good one there, Simon. I've said this to the guys that I coach through courts. I've said this on this show. I've said it in videos. You need to separate yourself from your emotions and think about it in terms. Judges don't care about emotions. They never have. They never will. Their job is to go by facts. So you want to present your facts, and it may not feel good to do that. I've talked about this before. I was a robot in the courtroom. My attorney, that she was like, I don't know how you do it. I was like the Terminator, I'll be back. Because emotion,
I'll be back.
yeah, because emotion, I was able to separate. I don't know why. People have asked me, how did you do it? I don't know. But I was able to separate myself from my emotions in the courtroom. I would leave, get in my car, drive off, and pound the dashboard, cry my eyes out, whatever it might be. But in the courtroom, it was all about the facts, baby. And it's ultimately how I succeeded. But a lot of guys struggle with that. And it's if you take nothing else away from this show, what Simon said and is key. You've got to step back and answer whatever the allegation is with facts, not with emotion, not feelings, because that's ultimately what's going to make the difference.
Well, the whole point there, Dan, if I'm not saying that all allegations are false. In my experience, not many have ever been evidenced. And the whole intention of putting the allegations in is simply to delay things and to get the fellas back up and to irritate him and let him fall out with social workers, let him isolate himself from everybody, and puts her in a strong position, because he's bound to get annoyed. He's bound to respond.
He's a human being. You're going to have emotional response. And you're right. It's the idea behind it is one of two avenues, one of two results they want to get. Get him so angry he does something stupid and justifies what the accusation is, or get him to give up. Just beat him until he gives up. And, unfortunately it works. Both one way or the other many, many, many times. And again, I always go back to who is the one who ultimately gets hurt? It's the child. And I say that as a child who was alienated from his father by his mother. And I am 60 years old. This all happened 50 plus years ago. And yet, in some ways, it's still affecting me now. And my mother was evil. And I will never, ever say anything different. I literally cheered when she died. Literally cheered when I was told she died. And I wasn't there, and
It's
neither was my sister, by the way, because we had separate fathers. But that's what woke me up to it. Is I saw what my mother was doing to my sister, and I went, "Holy crap!" Right? That's me. And my sister was the same way. She ultimately was able to reconnect with her dad. They had a great relationship. Um, my mother died alone. Nobody cared because everybody figured out what she had done. And you have to be, like you were talking about earlier, there's got to be some sort of illness going on, BPI or one of them, because
yeah,
to
definitely.
do this to your child, for the casual listener listening in and trying to really grasp this, if you want to understand the true dynamic behind it is, and just how bad it is, think about the type of person you would have to be that your goal is to destroy your child's relationship with the other parent. Because that's ultimately what they're trying to do. Knowing the damage that is going to do to the child, they know what they're doing. This isn't subconscious. They know what they're doing. And that is, to me, the epitome of evil. And that's why I say my mother was evil.
It's I read a case not so long ago. You're 61. I read a case of a gentleman who was 71. He was still getting therapy from parental alienation. But I think that means it was about before it was even came about. Did it come about in 1982?
Well,
Was it
yeah, it
82
was
or
in the
80?
it was I'm not sure the
In
exact
the
date, but it
80s.
was in the 80s,
Yeah,
and then Gardner started publishing his stuff. And for those of you that are going to pounce on it and try and disparage all of this because what Gardner, he ultimately unalived himself and all that stuff. Separate the man from the work, right? Read what he had to say. You were talking about, the various manifestations and all that. When you see them attack him as a man, you never really see them attack what he said, right? The manifestations,
yeah.
the 17 different things that are,
Stra-
yeah,
strategies.
strategies and all that. They never attack that. They attack him as a man. And I've talked with psychologists that have read his works and disagree in some cases, but they say there's, for lack of a better term, he's not entirely wrong. They may agree with some of the specifics, but they're not attacking him. If someone attacks him based on, there's claims about him, and I'm not going to get into all that. And he did ultimately unalive himself, and they disparage him because he did that. Well, that doesn't say his work and the work that he did was wrong. It speaks to, if that's your only recourse is to attack him as a person, pretty much indicates what he is saying is right, or at least in some way is. And uh, we only have a few more minutes, Simon. I just really quick, we've touched on so much here. Can you give some of the different um, tools that alienators use, some of the 17 tactics? Just briefly, real quick, maybe, I don't know if you have them handy or not, but just off the top of your head, maybe a
Yeah,
few of them. Because
yeah.
these
I've
are
got a
great
few.
ways to educate people on how to see if maybe that's a situation. If you could just touch on a few of them.
I wanted to go into. I know we're running out of time, Dan. Maybe we could do another one next week. Uh, but I haven't touched on the case that I'm on now. It is the worst case I've ever seen. Actually, we've got a fact finder hearing pending. I don't think I can't find a single case of a fact finder hearing on parental alienation in this country this far. So quite an accomplishment. There is the 17 alienating strategies, and there's the eight manifestations. Uh, it, we've evidenced strongly several times over, each and every one of them. And like I touched upon about the children saying, I want him and his family to stay away. But there was, I could go into more detail another day if we run out of time. But the things the children were saying about him, and it's just disgusting. Her attitude, and you were talking about Richard Gardner. Is everything he's saying creditable? Well, I can honestly tell you that apart from two of the strategies that are impossible given her situation, the mother, has followed all of the strategies to a T, and the children's manifestations exactly to Amy Barker's right up. Just to give you I wrote them down because I can't remember.
Yeah, that's why I said feel free to read. I'll tell you what, Simon, because we don't have a lot of time. Why don't you just read those off, and we'll close up after that. If you're willing to, why don't we reschedule also? Let's do a part 2 to this, because this is important stuff, and I do want to hear more about that other case, because we've talked off air also. So let's do that. Let's just kind of wrap things up here with some of those 17 and list off whatever you want, and then we'll wrap up. And then if you're willing to, and it sounds like, we'll reschedule a second session. We'll have you come by. We'll do this as a part 2 so we can make sure we go into depth. Fair enough?
Well, yeah. I'll just tell the guys, anybody who's listening, that obviously I've gone into my situation somewhat, and what I do and what's been going on. But the guy I'm working with the case is just horrendous, and I would like to educate people or give people my experience with parental alienation, because most people don't even know what it is, and they can't spot it until it's in the severe levels. You do have mild and moderate levels, but most people won't. Like I didn't know anything. I knew something was wrong when my daughter was screaming for 45 minutes. So I didn't know if she'd spent 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks belittling me to the child, and so I can read a few off. So you've got bad mouthing. It goes without saying that you're constantly bad mouthed to the alienating parent would bad mouth the targeted parent.
Mm-hmm.
Limiting contact, interfering with communication, interfering with symbolic communication, withdrawal of love, telling the child target parent doesn't love him or her, forcing the child to choose, creating the impression that the target parent is dangerous, which for me is one of the important ones.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only way to get inside the child's head is to make them believe that their father is unsafe, dangerous, not trustworthy.
Right.
Because if they were just bad mouthing the child all the time, the child, like you said earlier, it's a natural thing to love your father. You can't just bad mouth somebody and then they reject them.
Right.
They would probably feel like the clinical term for parental alienation, and I'm sure you've heard it, Dan, is called psychological splitting.
Yes, correct.
And the kids start to split their parents because they don't know who to be loyal to. Like I remember Bella always felt awkward, and she still does, Dan. You know, when I'm FaceTiming her, I FaceTime her on a Wednesday and Sunday, and she won't tell me she loves me while Mum's there. And she'll go into another room to do it, and she does it all the time. But yeah.
And anyway, by the way, that's how I was with my father. Right.
Yeah. She won't say it.
Yeah. Now, we didn't have FaceTime then. It was a phone that had this cord attached to the wall. But
was that a pigeon? It was a pigeon, wasn't it?
Yeah. But carrier pigeon back then. And that's the position I was in, because I knew that if I said, and my mother heard me say that I love you to my father, that I was going to pay hell for it. And that's a very good sign, tell you what, Simon, there's so much we need to cover. Why don't we stop
Well,
here if that's okay?
would you mind, Dan, if I just explain something quickly? So
So real quick,
what
because
you've
we're running out of time.
so you've got the strategies. Obviously, the strategies are what the alienating parent will use against the child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Amy Barker has put some manifestations together. So basically, how the strategies manifest in the child, they come out in a certain way. There's a pattern that's common in alienated children, and you have 8 manifestations, and they have to be present. There's like a 5 there's a 5 part module to parental alienation, and all 5 have to be present for it to be considered. So what we could do then, Dan, do a part 2. We can go through the 17 parental alienation strategies, give an idea of examples of them, because I see them repeating. So, for example, limited contact. You usually find that the alienated parent might take the child horse riding on Monday, gymnastics on Tuesday, swimming on Wednesday, church on Thursday, and there's a pattern that happens. So the other parent won't know at this point. They'll just think, oh, great, she's going horse riding, she's religious, and she's swimming, and she's healthy, great. But you don't know how to spot the pattern.
Right.
So what we could do is part 2. We could go through that, and I could give you examples of what I see repeating and repeating, so people can see that maybe they're going through 4, 5, or 6 of the strategies, and then we could go through the manifestations and see if the children are showing any characteristics of an alienated child. It's the manifestations that are important.
Mm-hmm.
So it would manifest in the child only if the child was alienated. So that's really important, that people understand that.
And that's why I want to do a dedicated show to it, so that we can do it, give it the proper justice and due that it deserves, because this is critical. It is absolutely critical that we talk about this and help raise awareness on it, because you threw out the number earlier, and I've seen the same number recently. 22 million children in the United States alone. And when you think about the number of children in the United States, that's 30% of them. 30-40% of children. Let that sink in for a moment. I'm sure the UK is probably not that much different. No. And that's why we need to do a whole show on that, because I don't want to shortchange it. So I appreciate that you're willing to do that, Simon. And so let's close it up with that, right? And we'll reschedule off air, okay? But before we go, because you do some amazing videos, how could people follow you on TikTok or anywhere else?
So my name on TikTok is Mustache Man.
Gee, I wonder why.
I believe it's Mustache Man 23. My age.
All right. Yeah. even I'm going to call bullshit on that one, my friend. And I will put a link to your account so that people can go follow you in the show notes below. No, Simon, we're gonna wrap it up here, and I want to say to you, thank you for sharing your story, first of all, and so much information. But there's more to come, people. So if you're 100%. Watching this now or in the future, come back or make sure you go and find episode 2, part 2 of this, because it is mission critical that we raise awareness on parental alienation, and there's so much to cover. We have to do a second show, and who knows, maybe a third. Who knows? But,
I was just quickly, Dan. I was just thinking earlier about that 22 million. Yeah, 22 million children have been alienated. That's only the ones that they know about. You could probably double that. Let's say that 1% of them unalive themselves. Look at that figure.
It's a number I don't want to. Yeah, it's a number I don't want to think about. Yeah.
I'm not even going to say it out loud what the number is.
Yeah,
I'm not very good at math.
I actually did the math in my head.
Wrong.
Yeah, it's let's not mention that number, but it's a scary
but it
number.
It's scary when you think about it.
So,
and yeah, okay.
All right. So let me go ahead and wrap the show up because amazing topic, and I thank Simon so much for sharing his story because that's a critical thing. Also, people hear what men and in some cases women go through when they are the targeted parent. Come back and see part 2. We will set it up and get it scheduled very quickly, and I will make sure that they go up back to back. So if you're watching this in the next week or so, come back the following week, you'll see it. If you're watching this in the future, part 2 will be there. I will put links to both shows in the show notes, so if you see one, you can go find the other. I can't thank Simon enough for his time. We're going to wrap it up at that. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, especially share because we're trying to get this information out. And we'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.